I'm Ricky. I'm a human being, a survivor of the aquapocalypse, a slave, food for my watery masters. How those masters came into power is anybody's guess. All I know is, one day I was jacking off to videos of the pink Power Ranger, and the next, the whole planet was flooded. And giant monsters were dragging those of us unlucky, enough not to die in the initial onslaught, down into the icy depths below. They called themselves the Deep Ones, the Old Ones, the Elder Gods, and all kinds of other things that make them sound super important. No two of them look exactly the same. They're just evil, vile things, but they can talk and think just like you or me. I guess because they're super intelligent aliens from another dimension. At least that's what people say. But people say all kinds of crazy shit now, and it's not like we have an internet down here or anything to fact check with. You just sort of take people's word for it most of the time. These aliens hate us and want us all dead. Why they hate us so much, I'll never know, but they do. They love to torture and eat us. They're real sadistic fuckers. Take my job, for example. I work in one of the subterranean cities beneath the ocean. How these cities existed without our knowledge before the Great Flood? Another question I can't answer. But there's a lot of those now. Questions, and not many answers. We're all too busy surviving. Oh yeah, my job. I work at a fast food restaurant that specializes in fresh flesh. Fresh human flesh. As in people are butchered here, and then we garnish their meat with little pieces of seaweed and coral and shit. As a joke, those of us who work here call it McHumans. And guess who they make kill people? That's right, me. Last week, I had to kill my buddy Sam. He used to work here too. In fact, he was the first person I met after I was dragged down into the murky depths. Everybody else that works here told us not to get emotionally attached to anyone because this sort of shit happens all the time. But we didn't listen. We both liked comic books and death metal. And what else is there to do but talk to each other when you're living in a waterlogged death camp just waiting for your number to come up anyway? 3 other people work with us on the night shift in the kitchen. Karen, a smoking hot little redhead who tells the best poop jokes in the joint. She has cerebral palsy or multiple sclerosis or whatever disease fucks up your body. It's not that bad. It doesn't fuck up her face or the way she talks. Her hands are kind of curled up and one of her legs doesn't bend and bows in when she walks. Her spine and neck are curved all funky, but other than that, top shelf pussy, man. Sometimes, when the others think we're off having a smoke break, I fuck Karen in the walk-in cooler. It's kind of weird, fucking a crippled girl, the cooler full of dead bodies, but hey, you take what you can get in this hellhole. It's all part of life in the aquapocalypse. Then there's this huge fat black dude we call Chef. You know, like the dude from South Park? Only this chef isn't all full of inspirational speeches and joy. No, this guy is a miserable, hate-filled racist. He's got a gigantic oily nose that looks like a brown pickle, and he's missing one of his front teeth. He's worked here the longest and says he loves it. Says he couldn't think of a better place to be than in a kitchen chopping up white people all day. But we know he's lying. He was a preacher in Detroit before all this happened. He just puts on the angry black man routine to keep from losing his shit. We all have our ways of dealing with the stress of death and misery hanging over our heads every second of every day. Like Ty, the final member of our crew. He deals with our living nightmare by dressing up like a woman. Wigs, makeup, the whole thing. But the weird part is, he's still got a big brown beard and doesn't talk with an effeminate voice or try to make us call him by a woman's name. No, he just dresses up like a chick. He's called a transvestite. I only know this because my sister used to be in a Rocky Horror troupe. Now my sister's dead. So anyway, one minute, me and Sam are swapping stories about fucking chicks back in our other life while we strip the skin off a pair of arms in the kitchen with the rest of the gang. And then bam, in comes our boss, a really funky looking crab thing with a huge white spiral shell covered in nasty barnacles. The way his big eyes sit on top of their stalks, Boss Crab, as we call him, always looks like he's surprised or in a state of shock. He has a name. Hell, they all have names. But fuck trying to pronounce those multi-syllable, too many consonant things. We just have nicknames for all of them. Well, he storms right up to us, gives us both the once-over with a look of astonishment, the whole time his little crab mouthparts moving a mile a minute, his disgustingly long, thin tentacle whiskers waving around, tasting the air, or whatever it is they're used for, when he reaches out with his enormous red claw, grabs poor Sam by the neck, and drags him into the back room, the killing room. A couple seconds later, Boss Crab screams for us to come back there too. The killing room always stinks, no matter how thoroughly we scrub it. There's just a permanent stench attached to it, like a slaughterhouse splashed with copious helpings of guilt and fear. The terror is palpable, and it echoes off the walls, giving the room an ominous, sinister air. Or maybe it's just a shit smell that never quite goes away. Everyone shits when they die, and our drain sucks. The room's too small for all of us to fit, so Chef, Ty, and Karen stand just outside the door. Boss Crab has a look on his face like he just saw an elephant climb into its own asshole. Sam is on the floor, totally confused. Hovering over him is Boss Crab's right-hand man, his muscle, as he likes to call him. The thing, if it even isn't him, is called Torgin, Salaroth, something. We just call him Fishbowl. Boss Crab breathes air, so he's fine running around inside McHumans, screaming at us and whatnot. But some of the horrid beasts, like Fishbowl, are strictly water dwellers. We don't even know what the hell Fishbowl is. He's all stuffed inside this black suit that looks sort of like one of those deep-sea diver contraptions. The body of the suit is always damp and sweaty. It's one big piece with connecting gloves and boots wrapped in rusted chains and covered in rotted seaweed. It even has a diver's helmet on top, only this helmet is more like a fishbowl. That's why we call him Fishbowl. Anyway, his helmet thing, it's completely full of water. Black, fetid water. Vague, horrid shapes swim around in that murky gunk. I can't even stare at it too long or I think I can see faces forming in the swirling darkness. Creepy shit. So Fishbowl's got a hold of Sam by the shoulders, and Sam's crying because he knows he's about to die, when Boss Crab starts swinging around this fire axe with his little shriveled hand, yelling in his crab language. Once he sees we're utterly clueless as to what's going on, he switches to English. I hate when he does that. If you've never heard a crab imitate human speech, trust me, you don't want to.
This little shit thought he was going to break out of here,
Boss Crab says, waving the axe in Sam's face. With his big claw hand, he throws a stack of paper on the ground.
Escape plans! He really thought he could outsmart me!
Chef snickers. Crazy crackers, he says under his breath. I scowl at him. We're fucked. I know what's coming next. I'm so fucking scared I can't feel my feet. Boss Crab turns the axe on me.
You were in on it too, weren't you? Explain yourself!
I don't know what the hell you're talking about, man. I'm not in on anything, I stammer, totally full of shit. I'm an awful liar, and it's about to get me killed. Boss Crab raises the axe as if to hit me with it. I flinch back and he continues screaming.
Shut the fuck up, monkey! You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know what goes on in my own restaurant?
Just tell him, Ricky, Sam whines. Now my eyes bulge like Boss Crab's. I make a slashing motion with my hand at my neck. He ignores me. Tell him what we were gonna do and maybe he'll let us live. Sam's really crying now, just blubbering like a little bitch. I guess I would too if I was in his position. If he says anything else, I probably will die. Boss Crab scuttles around to face Sam.
I know what you two idiots were going to try to do.
He motions his big claw at a pair of scuba tanks sitting on a table in the corner. We have to use them to go from the restaurant back to our slave quarters down in the human district. The only compensation we get for our jobs is oxygen for the tanks. We're literally paid in air. Boss Crab continues his rant, and I try my best not to shit myself.
You do realize I only keep enough air in those things for a round trip to and from the slave camp, right?
Sam breaks down completely at this point. He's all sobbing incoherently, gasping for air between his cries. He put me up to it, boss. I swear. He said we were going to go back to the surface.
What surface? The whole world's flooded, you fucking retard. Even if you did manage to break out of here, even if you hid air up your asses, once you got up there, you just float to death.
Boss Crab turns back to me.
Anything to say for yourself, monkey?
I put my arms up and shrug, clueless as to what to say next. Finally, I stammer out, sorry? I can't tell if Boss Crab is genuinely surprised at my lack of defense, or if he's just staring at me. Then he thrusts the axe out, not in a killing blow, but with the handle facing me. Totally confused, I take it from him. He says,
Not as sorry as your friend here. You cook a mean-brained souffle. Him, he couldn't even burn a brisket to save his life. Kill him.
What? I ask, as if he's just fucking with me for a second before he snaps my face off with his claw.
Prove your loyalty to the restaurant. Kill this one so we can get on to the business at hand. Murder your co-conspirer and never try that shit again. Do I make myself clear?
Aw, shit, Karen says from behind Chef. That ain't right, Ty says, walking away from the doorway back to the kitchen. I look at them all for a brief second, hoping they have some sort of brilliant plan to keep me from chopping up my best bud, but they've got nothing. Reluctantly, I turn around and prop the axe up on my shoulder. Sorry, Sam. This fucking sucks. I say with total sincerity, raising the blade above my head. There I stand in the only t-shirt I brought down here with me. A faded, ripped-up Dio Holy Divers shirt, my curly brown, shoulder-length hair matted to my pale forehead, about to murder my friend, and all I can think is, damn, I wish I could take his Aussie shirt before it gets blood all over it. That's what living down here does to you. Makes you callous, uncaring. That's the only way to survive. Sam struggles, mumbling shit I can't understand through his snotty nose and tears. Fishbowl holds him tight. Chef covers Karen's eyes as the blade comes down, cleaving poor Sam's face open. A wet thunk, sort of like when you cut open a pumpkin, resonates through the small killing room. Sam's cries abruptly end as what sits behind his face slowly oozes out onto his shirt. He slumps over. His body thrashes a few times and then he goes still. At least he didn't suffer. Before I can even register that I've murdered my best friend, Boss Crab snatches the axe away from me and starts yelling again.
Get the fuck back in here, you warm-blooded sacks of shit!
Karen, Chef, and Ty had tried to creep away. They sulk back into the doorway as Boss Crab shoves me towards them.
Listen up,
he says, scooping up a bit of Sam off the floor.
We've got a new contract this afternoon. A big one. Pretty much the biggest.
He starts to unscrew the knob sealing Fishbowl's helmet in place. A loud hiss, followed by a pop, signals the release of the pressurized lid. Boss Crab flips the top open.
Cthulhu and goddamn self has requested us to cater a party he's having next week. He's bringing forth all the old ones as he prepares to raise Relay and reclaim the surface of the earth in his name. He wants us to provide the food.
The black, fetid water looks like a calm oil slick until Boss Crab dangles bits of Sam over the open container. Then, the rancid shit begins to slosh around inside the helmet. Karen dry heaves as the reek overwhelms us. My eyes start to water, and we all put our hands up to cover our mouths. Little pincher claws, suction cup laced tendrils, and pointy-tipped legs that look like they belong on a tarantula burst forth from the brackish ooze, snatching and grabbing at the fresh flesh. Boss Crab drops the hunk of human meat into the helmet and quickly snaps it shut before continuing.
So we're going to have a lot of dirty vertebrae coming through here this week. I expect my team to be on your A game. Do I make myself clear?
Still in shock, we all nod, and Boss Crab scuttles away with Fishbowl in tow. That was last week. Now the gang and I stand in front of the entrance of Relay, Cthulhu's great sunken city, the largest kingdom in the underworld, with handfuls of bags containing all the people we've slaughtered and cooked over the last week. Behind us, our scuba gear lays discarded on the rim of a gigantic pressurized moon pool, one of many such pools that the denizens of Relay use to come and go. See, most of the monsters that now rule the planet are amphibious, so these sunken cities are habitable to air breathers. This particular moon pool is about half the size of a freaking football field, and it's a good thing, too. The Leviathan fish frog beasts carrying the rest of the food for Cthulhu's party barely fit through the hole. Man, this is going to be a massive feast. Fishbowl steers the lead Leviathan out of the moon pool and up the jawbridge type thing we stand in front of, while the other follows close behind. We step out of the way so the gargantuan things don't crush us. They remind me of a monitor lizard wearing a fish head Halloween costume the size of a city freaking block. Twin emerald doors covered in glowing glyphs and runes that ooze a glowing green goo, rising so high above our heads that I have to lean backwards to see the very tops, open slowly, allowing Fishbowl and the Leviathans to pass into the belly of Grand Relay. I fucking hate this place, Ty says, as the rear Leviathan stomps into a spiraling descent across the floor that is sometimes a ceiling, sometimes a wall, depending on how you set your eyes. Relay is funny like that. What with the non-Euclidean geometry and all that. Nothing in the sunken city is quite where you think it should be, relatively speaking. We step through the entrance. Ty is wearing a blue wig set in pigtails. He wears a matching blue sundress with black polka dots. A pair of black and white Converse sneakers round out his outfit. Chef shifts his bag to his right hand, giving Ty a long, hard look. I know what's coming.
Cracker, you robbed the teeny bopper section of the Gap when shit went down upstairs or what? I do not understand where you find those god-awful clothes, man.
We continue walking. I try to keep my eyes closed so I don't notice that my feet are where my head should be. Ty doesn't flinch. He's heard it all before. He looks at Chef right in the eye and says, "They're my daughter's clothes. I grabbed 2 trash bags full of them when the rivers flooded over into the cities. Chef raises an eyebrow. We didn't even make it out of town, Ty says, stopping, turning his body to face the burly black man. The rest of us stop too. Remember the things that burrowed up out of the ground? The things with way too many legs and eyes that squirmed? They took her. They ripped her right out of my arms and dragged her down to those fetid mud pits, pulverized her body into mush right in front of my eyes. And you know what? Maybe if I didn't have my hands fucking full of her clothes, I could have saved her. If I just dropped the bags, I could have pulled her free, but I didn't. I lost my daughter on day 1, and all I have to show for it is these clothes.
Damn,
Chef says, breaking eye contact.
That's fucked up.
Before the big bear of a man could say any more, 4 hideous-looking things slither their way down the long corridor right up to us. Down here, everything looks awful. You just have to get used to it or you won't survive. You have to learn to shut off the part of your mind that screams in agony and begs you to find the nearest hole to crawl into when it sees the fucked up monsters that live down here. These particular horrors, believe it or not, are even more stomach-turning than the normal fish frog octopoid monsters. These things have long, slender bodies with 6 or 8 skinny insect-like legs on either side. The bodies end in what look like a pair of twin scorpion tails, each tipped with dagger-like stingers. They skitter along on their bellies, slithering almost like snakes. Their heads are just a mess of tentacles with long, sharp hooks on the ends of some, eyeballs on the ends of others. Right in the center of this cluster of tendrils sits a drooling, multi-segmented mouth, snapping and undulating. Karen cries out as one of the scorpion things skitters up to her and starts grabbing at her bags. She leaps behind me, leaving the thing to squirm its revolting appendages at me. I hold my bags out of reach as another one of the monsters assaults Ty in the same way, pinning him up against the wall that was the ceiling the last time I looked at it. What the fuck is this thing doing? He screams as it plucks the bag from his hand, ripping it to shreds, dumping its contents on the ground at his feet. It tears the cooked human meat apart, shoving huge chunks of it into its writhing mouth.
Sniffers,
Chef says.
They're here to make sure the food ain't poisoned. Don't worry, just let them do their thing and...
The sniffer goes stiff, shrieks, then vomits up all the meat it's just consumed and falls over dead. I poison the food, I say, as everyone looks at me with wide eyes and slack jaws. Before anyone can react, one of the remaining sniffers lunges itself at Ty, dragging him down to the ground with its face feelers. He's screaming bloody murder as Chef runs forward, saying, "Oh, hell!" The big man pulls out some sort of 5-pointed yellow stone and screams in a language I don't understand, causing the closest sniffer to wilt and singe as though they've been caught under a child's magnifying glass. The big man pulls out some sort of 5-pointed yellow stone and screams in a language I don't understand, causing the closest sniffers to wilt and singe as though they've been caught under a child's magnifying glass. They die instantly. He turns on the one pinning Ty to the ground and yells the same weird words at it, killing it as dead as the others, but not before it manages to land a stinger directly into Ty's left shoulder. The injured man rolls over and kicks his feet on the ground like an infant, throwing a tantrum, screaming through clenched teeth.
"Just what the fuck kind of bullshit stunt you think you're pulling here, white boy?"
Chef says, turning towards me.
"You just signed all our death warrants."
I stand my ground, crossing my arms. You heard, Boss Crab. Cthulhu's gonna raise the city, and all those fucking alien monsters will be here today. This is our chance, man.
Our chance?
Chef says, menacing over me, star thing still clutched in his right hand.
Cracker, you done fucked up. We ain't got no chance. Never did. There ain't no killing these sons of bitches. You might as well have poisoned us in our sleep. We're all dead already.
Fuck that, I say, holding my head high. All we gotta do is make sure all those fuckers eat the food and...
And then what?
Chef screams, yellow eyes bulging, spittle flying from his mouth.
You kill all the monsters? Then what you gonna do? Ride a fucking seahorse back to your bitch-ass mama's house? There ain't nothing up there, Cracker. You don't know how good you had it down there at McHumans. Your ass is lucky Boss Crab ain't fed you the fishbowl yet, and you gonna pull some bitch-ass shit like this?
He closes his eyes dramatically and yells at the ceiling that was the floor the last time I checked.
Lord help me! This cracker done got my ass killed!
That's not gonna happen, I say, crossing my arms in defiance. I've got a plan. Chef opens one eye, looks at me skeptically. I've heard stories, rumors really, about a plug.
A plug? Oh hell, that's slave talk, boy. Dumb shit crackers be saying to each other in the dark to try to keep their spirits up. That shit ain't real.
Bullshit, I say, poking the big man in his chest with my finger. You don't know that. You don't know shit. You just sit back in that kitchen like a... Chef bats away my hand.
Like a what, white boy? Say it. Say it. Like a good house nigga.
I was gonna say like a bitch. The plug is real. Think about it. It has to be real. Where else did the water come from that flooded the earth? It didn't just appear out of nowhere. You're talking millions, maybe billions of gallons of seawater. It had to come from a vast, planet-wide undersea chasm or cavern, and I have it on good authority that the plug the monsters used to seal it off after they sucked all the water out is right directly beneath our feet at the bottom of Relay.
Oh my God, kid. Oh my God,
Chef says, laughing hysterically till tears are running down his face. Sobering, he wipes the tears away and looks at me directly in the eyes.
We're good as dead, son. You hear me? All because of a fairy tale told by dumb crackers in the night. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna head back down to McHumans and see if I can convince Boss Crab to bake my big black ass into a nice filet mignon before he gets a hold of your ass. I don't want to be living to see what he gonna do to you.
I grab him by his huge arm when he turns to leave. You can't go, Chef. If these monsters notice you're missing, they'll know something's wrong. Boss Crab undoubtedly told them to expect 4 slaves to deliver the food. Without you, they'll be suspicious and blow our plan. Our only chance is to act normal and head down to the banquet hall. Please, I say, begging the big man with my eyes. He's right, Karen says. The way she looks at me when she says it, I realize in that moment that she's in love with me. Great, I think. Just what I need. The crippled girl falling for me right before I make my escape. She'll probably want to come with me back to the surface world once the water's gone. Too bad for her, though. I've already got a lover. She continues. If we take off now, they're bound to notice. They'll check the food. They'll know it's poison before we can even make it back to McHumans. Our best shot is with Ricky. With that, she turns around and starts kicking at one of the sniffer's stingers. Ty finally manages to get up off the ground. His arm is at least twice its normal size, and the area around the sting has already turned a deep purple. He clutches his arm and, by the look on his face, is in a great deal of pain. You two are out of your minds, he says, grimacing, not bothering to fix the wig that's fallen half off his head, revealing short brown hair below. Come on, Chef. Let's get back to McHumans. I've got to get this arm looked at. Before he can take a step, a stinger jabs inches from his face. Karen has ripped it free. She wraps the dangling flesh and tendons around her arm, tying it down with her teeth and free hand. Now it's a weapon the size of her whole arm. You heard, Ricky. If you two leave and we show up at the banquet hall alone, they'll know something's up. Besides, she says, poking his wounded arm with her normal hand, by the look of that sting, you ain't gonna make it all the way back to McHumans alive. Best you stick with us. Maybe there's some kind of anti-venom in there we can use to fix your arm. Ty looks at Chef, expecting him to argue more. Instead, the big man starts kicking at another sniffer. He's peeled away the entire back carapace of one of the beasts and slings the armor-plated exoskeleton over his chest like a bulletproof vest.
She's right, lady boy. They both are. If we gon' die one way or the other, I guess I'd rather die trying to kill as many of these alien fish monsters as I can before they send me up to heaven with my mama. Y'all best start cutting up a sniffer of your own, because I'm finna wear this whole mother on my fat black ass.
We're gonna need as much of this as we can carry, Karen says. Even if one monster sees us and gets away to tell the big bad octopus man, we're fucked. Ty reluctantly reaches down and starts pulling his own sniffer apart. We're already fucked, he says under his breath. We spend the next 10 minutes ripping the sniffers to shreds, loading ourselves up with body armor, pinchers, and stingers for weapons, and the awful-looking beasts' heads for helmets, writhing tentacle faces and all. Where'd you get that star thing anyway, Chef? I ask, as we tighten up our armor and head off down into the bowels of Relay.
You know how those cults all over the world got together and summoned up the monsters that flooded the earth? Well, I was part of another kind of cult.
What kind was that? I ask, trying to decide if I'm upside down or right side up as we descend deeper into the sunken stone kingdom of the elder gods.
The kind that tried to stop this awful shit from happening in the first place.
You didn't do a very good job. Chef stops and glares at me for a long, uncomfortable moment. I'm pretty sure he's about to swing one of his stinger weapons at me when he cracks a wide smile and belly laughs so loud it echoes down the twisted corridor.
No, my boy, we sure didn't, did we?
Before long, we're turned around, deep inside the claustrophobic, damp walls of Relay. Guys, maybe we should turn back the other way. I think we missed a turn about 50 yards back, I say, scratching my neck with my free hand through the gaping dead mouth of the sniffer head sitting on top of my own. The thick exoskeleton is irritating my skin. I thought you said you knew where we were going, Ty says, red-faced, panting. He's starting to sweat a lot. He doesn't look healthy anymore.
This is a terrible idea. We're all gonna die down here.
I'm looking around at this point, trying to ignore the injured man's complaining, but he might be right. I can't tell if we're moving forward, backward, up, or down. I know the banquet hall resides in the deepest section of the Titan structure, but without Euclidean geometry, there's no telling which direction is actually down. For all I know, we're walking in circles, just waiting for some awful monster to stumble up and make us his evening meal. I never actually said I knew where we were going. I said I have it on good authority that the plug is at the bottom of Castle Relay. How exactly we get there, that's anybody's guess. Ty catches me off guard. My peripheral vision is filled with limp, dangling tentacles. He slams me against the wall and points his stinger in my face. The smell of the sniffer parts, both Ty's and my own, makes my eyes water. Karen and Chef look on, but don't do anything to stop the confrontation. They want us to sort this out on our own. When he talks, Ty's voice is strained, and his words are slightly slurred.
I'm not gonna fucking die for you, Ricky. I don't even fucking like you. You're a smug little shit. Why should any of us trust you anyway? We all watched you kill the only guy at McHumans that ever did like you.
Before I can respond, a scream from behind us, or maybe above us, breaks the tension in our group. A human scream. Ty stands rigid. I fix my sniffer helmet, which has shifted around in the scuffle. I attempt to walk away, hoping the next bend leads us to our destination, but Ty grabs my armor.
Wait,
he says, as another scream rips through the stone hallway.
Oh, I know that voice.
Still favoring his ever-swelling arm, he ducks through a passageway in the wall beside us. I look at the others puzzled. I guess we should follow him. We all walk cautiously toward a weird faint glow much further down the corridor. Well, it seems further until we take 6 or 7 steps, and then we're right on top of the light source. It's some kind of room or chamber, the opening of which is a tall archway set with dozens of glowing green runes.
Hold up,
Chef whispers, his voice muffled by the enormous sniffer tentacles draping over his mouth.
We don't know what's in there. We can't be fucking around with no hero shit. We gotta get down to that banquet hall before those monsters get suspicious. Fishbowl's gonna come looking for our asses if we don't get moving.
Ty waves away Chef's warning, poking his head into the room. The rest of us hug the wall, waiting for his report. After a moment, he pulls his head back out of the room.
I knew it.
Knew what, Cracker?
Take a look for yourselves.
Karen looks first, then suppresses a small squeak. Chef chances a look around the corner next. Then he leans back and closes his eyes.
Fuck,
he says.
That ain't good.
What is it? Cautiously, I stick my head inside and gasp. The room isn't very big, maybe the size of the inside of a gas station with a ceiling twice as tall. In the center of the room stands 3 pillars on a slick, reflective black floor, so much so that the surface looks like black ice. Behind the pillars is another doorway with an equally ornate archway containing similar glowing green runes. The screams we heard no doubt originated from the 3 naked women tied to the pillars by their hands and feet. The cause of the screams is more than evident. 3 figures wearing hooded cloaks stand menacing the nude women at the base of the pillars. They are gathered around the westernmost pillar, and one of the hooded things splashes some sort of pink oil on the exposed breasts and chest of their captive. As her scream rings out again, the rest of my group poke their heads back into the room. She's an older black woman, heavy set. Her tits are surprisingly perky. Back in the real world, I would have totally fucked her, but we're not in the real world. We're at the bottom of the ocean, and this poor lady is tripping so hard, I wonder if she's going to break her restraints. She bucks and thrashes, but unfortunately for her, they hold fast. The woman strapped to the easternmost pillar screams and thrashes almost as much as the black lady. She's a brunette in her 20s, so looks. I wouldn't kick her out of bed, but I wouldn't look twice if I saw her in the grocery store. But Ty isn't paying attention to the black chick or the brunette. His eyes are focused on the thick girl tied to the middle pole. She's got wild, frizzy, curly red hair and tattoos that travel from wrist to wrist, connecting across her chest all the way down to her huge, drooping, pierced tits. Her eyes are closed, her head is down, as if she's trying to will herself away from the strange chamber.
Leslie,
he says. Chef pulls him back out of the room.
You know that fat bitch?
Ty glares at the big man.
Yeah, I do. Leslie and I were in the same group when they rounded us up and shoved us inside those leviathans. When they dragged us all down here to this hell, we were separated after a few days. I was sent off to McHumans. I thought they'd killed her. The last thing she said to me was that she'd find me, and that if we had to die down here, she wanted to die with me.
Well, that's touching, I say, but we've got to get to the banquet, so give your girlfriend one last look and let's fucking boogie. It don't look like she's getting out of this one, bub. Ty grinds his teeth. He looks like he's about to take a swing at me. I don't blame him. I know I'm an asshole, but seeing this thing through and making it to the banquet is more important to me than some cross-dressing weirdo's feelings. That's when the Black Lady explodes. The awful sound of her shrieking and wailing, accompanied by breaking bones and tearing flesh, causes us to drop to the floor and peek our heads back into the room once more. The poor woman looks as if a grenade has gone off between her tits. Her entire midsection is blown outward. Gnarled, jagged pieces of bone jut out at all angles. Internal organs hang from their pointed tips. Her life's blood and unidentifiable hunks and pieces of her insides pool at the base of the pillar to which she's tied.
Why the fuck are they blowing up women?
Karen whispers, wide eyes shocked with horror, and then we see why. The Black Lady's body begins to convulse, and the hooded figures cautiously back away. More crimson goo ejects from her massive wound as her limbs flop and flail against her bindings. Then a massive claw impossibly drags its way out of her torn chest, a claw the size of her entire body, followed by a pair of long, groping antennae. A monstrous, gibbering head with huge eyes and a mouthful of squirming teeth begins to push its way out of the wound, but a huge, bulky horn jutting from its forehead gets caught inside the lady's ribcage. It pushes, backs up, and pushes again, ramming the inside of her chest, causing her big perky tits to flop up and down, not unpleasantly, until the horn begins to poke through right between her sizable boobs, eventually ripping through the ribs, finally splitting her open, ruining once and for all her amazing rack. The thing flops its way out of her body and lands at the base of the pillar, somehow more than 3 times the dead woman's size. The fuck? I say, barely able to keep my composure as the thing shakes the gore from its shark-like hide and scampers off through the opposite door. Several more horrors do the same, each far too large to fit inside the dimensions of the black woman's body, but slither and rip their way out nonetheless. They all follow the first monster through the passage opposite our own. What the fuck am I watching, I ask, ready to turn away and forget I ever saw this horrid ritual.
Some kind of portal,
Chef says.
They're using women's bodies to transport creatures here for the banquet from various other kingdoms at the bottom of the sea, I'm guessing.
Disgusting,
Karen says, turning away, looking very pale and shaken. Yeah, I've seen enough. Let's get out of here, I add.
Not without Leslie,
Ty says, though his conviction has faltered considerably since eyeballing the huge beasts fighting their way out of the black woman's body. Oh no, I say, starting off back the way we'd come. Karen trails me like a love-struck shadow. I'm not here to play cavalry for some fat bitch. You want to be Captain Save-A-Ho, you be my guest. Come on, guys. We gotta find this fucking banquet before it's too late.
I expected as much from you, Ricky.
I stop and turn around. What's that supposed to mean?
We all watched you axe your best friend in the face. Why would I believe you'd risk your ass to save me, or Chef, or even little Karen there?
My face turns red inside my sniffer helmet. Don't you question my loyalties, you cross-dressing sissy! I cut myself off before I can say anything worse. Then, composing myself, I say, look, I have to find the plug so I can save all of us. I need you. I need everybody to make it to the banquet. I'm sorry about your friend. I truly am. But we have got to keep moving. Chef, come on. It's time to go.
No,
Chef says. I stare at him. Oh, for Christ's sake, why not?
You see the way them monsters are headed, white boy? Where you think they're going in such a hurry? Fuck my life!
I growl under my breath, stalking back up to the rest of the group, Karen in tow.
To the fucking banquet!
We've got to go through there?
Karen asks, suddenly looking even more pale. I look through the archway again. There's no way we can sneak past those cloaked things. The room's just not big enough. How on earth do you propose we go through there?
We don't go through,
Chef says.
We go up.
Chef goes first, demonstrating just how elastic the physics of relay truly are. He plants one foot firmly against the wall in front of the archway and then falls backwards. Karen yelps, and I flinch forward on instinct, trying to catch him before he hits the ground, but he doesn't. Instead, he casually lifts his other leg and begins a vertical ascent up the wall. When he reaches the tall ceiling, he does the same thing until he's completely upside down, staring at us from above.
What you white people waiting for? Get your butts up here!
The rest of us climb the ceiling. The already surreal scene before us gets that much weirder from our new vantage point. Now, the cloaked figures and the helpless naked women are upside down above us, and we're climbing into the room as quietly as we can, hoping not to disturb the captors or the monsters they continue to unleash from inside the bodies of the captive women. We manage to sneak halfway across the room before everything goes to fuck. By the time we get to that point, the cloaked figures have splashed the strange liquid onto the mid-20s brunette strapped to the easternmost pillar, and more monsters have piled their way out of her torso, resembling a scene of corny clowns stumbling out of a tiny car. She's been torn open in such a way that her chest and naked tits are sitting parallel to her chin, almost like a sort of tray with boobs. Really gnarly stuff. But it's when the cloaked things move on to Ty's friend Leslie that our whole plan shits the bed. Having seen what happened to the other two women, she's really going nuts up there, upside down above our heads. There's maybe 25 feet separating the gore fest happening on the floor above, and us crawling across the ceiling like cat burglars below. Cat burglars stuffed inside the carcasses of alien, lobster, scorpion, monster thingies. By this point, the obsidian floor is thick with sloppy fluids and unidentifiable hunks of meat that have so recently belonged to the deceased women. The hooded figures, though, they don't slip on the muck. They glide across the surface, almost as though their feet don't touch the floor. Leslie thrashes against her restraints as the figures begin to chant and produce yet another vial of pink liquid. Ty is watching all of this from a crouched position, his head cranked back, staring straight up. He's in the lead, so it prevents the rest of us from moving forward. Go! I hiss, punching him in the ass cheek. Leslie wails again, and Ty stands up, still watching the events unfold above. Then he just jumps. He looks like fucking Superman as he leaps into the air and keeps going up. Relay doesn't give a shit about gravity, obviously. Oh no! Karen exclaims as Ty lands directly on top of the middle cloaked figure, knocking the pink liquid container from its hand, causing the weird stuff to explode onto the shiny black surface of the floor. No portal opens there. Flesh seems to be the key ingredient in its magic. Ty struggles to his feet. Now he's upside down like the rest of them. He takes a swing at the figure to his right, but misses. The figure to his left grabs him in a bear hug and holds him there, while the middle figure climbs to its feet. Ty is now officially fucked. Damn it! I yell, too loudly. The figures look up, down, whatever. They see us. Now we're fucked, too. Chef jumps first. Karen and I look at each other, worry painted on our faces behind the limp tentacles of our sniffer helmets. Then we jump. Now we're all right side up again, standing on the smooth black surface of the ritual chamber floor. Chef, Karen, and I stand facing the pillars containing the captive Leslie and her dead companions. The three cloaked figures stand with their backs to her, facing us. The middle one holds Ty with one arm and holds an open container of pink liquid above Ty's head with the other. No one moves for several beats. Even Leslie, who is wide-eyed and shocked at the sudden turn of events, has quieted down. Even at this close distance, less than 10 feet, I still can't make out the features of the cloaked figures. It's as though the cloth sucks the color out of reality. Not the color black, as much as the absence of anything. What's the call here, Chef? I ask, finally. He looks at me like I'm retarded, takes a deep breath and says, "Oh, okay, all right. Look, just let the sissy white boy go, and the fat bitch too. Go ahead and let him go, and fuck it." He whips out his star-shaped stone and barks a short chant. The liquid vial and the cloaked figure's gnarled gray hand explode in a pink mist, causing the figure to lose its grip on Ty long enough for him to swing around and plant his stinger-tipped arm gauntlet into the thing's chest. I take the opportunity to charge forward, focusing on the cloaked figure to the right, while Chef manages the one on the left. "Get the girl!" I yell to Karen, who limp gallops toward the pillars. Ty retracts his stinger and looks at it in disbelief. "No blood?" But before he can comment further, the cloaked figure extends its arm and bellows a quick chant, sending Ty sprawling across the black floor, armor smoking. Chef takes a more direct approach. Using his enormous hand, he grips the cloaked figure up by its head and puts the starstone right up against it. He says a few quick words, and the thing's head turns to dust in his hands. It drops to the floor, but lands standing. A thick gray tendril resembling the trunk of an elephant sprouts from the neck of the cloak. "What the?" Chef starts. The figure's hands dart out, grabbing Chef by his massive shoulders. The tendril wraps around the black man's thick neck. "Crackers!" he says, starting to choke already. A little help here!" I fare no better. I try a slashing attack, but the figure in front of me easily parries. I spin around and manage to grab it around the head in a shitty schoolyard headlock. I stab at its body with my stinger arm, but like Ty, I have no luck drawing even so much as a gasp from the thing. It's when I drag it to the ground and pull the cloak away that I finally understand why. It's a woman. A dead woman, just like those strapped to the pillars. What's animating the corpse is a series of gray tendrils coiled around its limbs and weaving in and out of its exposed wounds. All the tendrils converge onto one thick root that sticks up from the black floor. The cloaked figures are corpse puppets. But if the tentacles are rooted to the floor, how are the corpse puppets moving around? I don't have time to investigate the question further. The rotted thing tosses me aside and pulls itself upright. The corpse's feet don't even touch the ground. The legs are all pulled up and useless, while the thick tentacle sways back and forth. A jar of pink liquid rolls away from its discarded robes. I grab it and quickly tuck it inside my sniffer armor. Then I stand, facing the dead woman all run through with tendrils as though she's caught on some twisted tree branch. I lunge at it again, but it knocks my blow away and grabs me by the throat, lifting me off the ground. The tip of a tendril slithers through one of the dead woman's eye sockets, wiggling at me in mockery while I choke for breath. I'm fairly sure it's about to break my neck, but then it surges forward and slams me hard into something. This does not help my ability to breathe. Gasping, heart pounding, begging for air, I'm able to kick the corpse puppet away. I take in huge breaths, craning my neck around to see what's poking me in the back. It's the black chick. Her exploded ribs are digging into mine through small spaces in my armor. I pull myself free just as the corpse puppet renews its aggression. I turn, hoping my armor will absorb the impact of the creature's rushing attack. It does. But the force of the blow throws me forward, and somehow, some way, I end up ramming headfirst right inside the black lady's open chest. At first, I don't realize what's going on. I open my eyes and I no longer see the corpse puppet. I don't see my friends or any of the other cloaked corpses either. I'm staring at an empty room. It's not exactly like the one I should be in, but it's another ritual chamber for sure. That's when I hear shrieking. I feel hands behind my head pushing me down. I think it's the corpse puppet. I struggle to turn around, which is difficult considering I'm inside the armor of a dead bug. I prepare to attack, but when I finally get turned around, facing towards the ceiling, I realize something is very wrong. Instead of the grotesque face of the corpse puppet, I'm looking at a very alive woman. She's pushing and yanking on me and screaming in agony. It's when I look down that I realize why. I'm sticking out of her stomach. The corpse puppet has thrown me through the black lady into another room inside another castle in another part of the ocean. I'm stuck halfway through a fucking dimensional portal made of flesh. Stop it! Stop it, I say, trying to calm the woman as she yanks at my sniffer helmet's face tentacles and beats at my chest plate. I quickly realize it won't do any good to talk to her. She's clearly lost her mind. Who wouldn't? She's had horrible monsters crawling through her abdomen for the better part of an hour. At least the corpse puppets had the decency to kill their captives before using them as flesh tunnels. What kind of savage thing would purposely keep this woman alive to suffer through all the pain and agony of being a flesh tunnel? That question is answered when a deep thudding begins just outside the ritual chamber archway. The woman seizes up, stops struggling. Her eyes go wide. Her already pale flesh becomes nearly translucent from fear. I lean my head back to see what she's so afraid of. Oh fuck. The creature standing just outside the archway has to duck to fit inside. It's huge, reptilian, yet bipedal. It looks like what would happen if Leatherface and a giant troll gang raped a dinosaur. It's wearing a crimson leather apron that's big enough to cover an extended cab pickup truck. It has little black beady eyes and a snout with two little slits for nostrils. Its smooth, lipless mouth is covered in unidentifiable brown meat, suggesting it has only just finished its lunchtime meal. In its two huge arms, it carries more nude-bound women. It drops them into a small cage on the far side of the chamber, pushing them down and closing the lid against their flailing, screaming protests as easily as a toddler putting away his toys. That's about all the time I have before it sees me. A grown man wearing dead bug armor, sticking halfway out of a dying woman's stomach, isn't easy to miss. The thing hisses, its tongue darting out 5 feet or more, and picks up some kind of club from next to the cage of women. As if that isn't bad enough, I feel my lower body being pushed from the other side of the portal. I assume it's the corpse puppet trying to jam my legs the rest of the way through the dead black lady's chest. I hear splashing and screaming coming from that side. It sounds like water in a pool sloshing around. I don't have any more time to consider what the hell is going on over there or how my friends are faring against the corpse puppets because the huge dinosaur dude in here comes charging across the room, and all the while the chick I'm stuck inside of is clawing and yanking at me. I'm pretty sure this is it for me. If Dino Man doesn't kill me, the corpse puppet on the other side will, and that's if this chick doesn't manage to break my neck first. Only at the last possible second do I realize I still have a jar of pink liquid under my armor. I reach inside and get 2 fingers on it, but I'm so cramped up I can't get the rest of my hand around it. My heart is racing and I just keep screaming, "Oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck," as the dinosaur thing covers the distance between us, pulls back its club like a baseball bat, and swings for the fences. I close my eyes, desperately hoping that maybe my armor will save me, when I feel a sickening thud right above me, and I suddenly have more than enough room to grab hold of the pink vial. I open my eyes and look up. I'm no longer stuck inside the stomach of the woman. I'm not stuck because the dino creature has smashed her upper body into pulp with one swing, splitting her torso basically down the middle, leaving me plenty of room to pull out my jar of liquid, which I do as quickly as I can. The reptile beast lifts its club to smash down again, but I unscrew the cap and throw the liquid onto its face before it can finish its attack. Instantly, the horror's face rips in half as a slimy, webbed claw tears its way through, killing the beastie before its huge body can even hit the floor. Not waiting around to see what shade of awful this new monster will be, I kick the corpse puppet off my legs and pull my way back through the black lady, making sure to grab hold of the mangled woman's upper torso on the way back to the original ritual chamber, using her body to plug the hole and prevent the new horror from making its way over to this side. My relief lasts all of 2 seconds before I see the source of the splashing water I'd heard from the other side. I can't catch a fucking break, I mumble as I gaze into the 3 faces of a giant black octopus monster. The black floor has somehow turned into black water, and the octopus, easily the size of a school bus, juts up out of it, a stark gray contrasting the inky water. The faces on each side of its huge head have one seriously evil-looking red eye, and the middle face only has one, albeit even more evil-looking than the other 2 combined, making the whole thing really trippy to look at. It's got 3 separate mouths, all of them screaming different obscenities at my friends, who are now all caught up in its tentacles, which have discarded their meat puppets. Chef on the far side, Karen in the middle, and Ty closest to me, all of them stabbing and clawing at the constricting tentacles, but all held fast. Chef looks at me, terror etched onto his painted face.
It's a trap! Get out of here, white boy!
I turn around to do just that when another voice stops me in my tracks.
Get me off this fucking post!
Leslie! She's still tied up. I rush up to her and slash her bindings away with my sniffer stinger. It's okay, I've got you. Now let's get out of it. Before I can finish my thought, she pulls my stinger gauntlet off my arm and runs, totally naked, toward the black water. She screams a battle cry so deep and ferocious it would impress a whole battalion of men at war. She leaps right into the waist-high water and lunges toward the octopus, slamming the stinger into its crazy middle eyeball, causing the beast to shriek and fling my friends across the room. Torrents of bright blue ichor squirt into the air as Leslie climbs up its open mouth and continues to stab at it. As the octopus sinks below the inky water, Leslie doesn't stop stabbing, even after the monster is completely submerged. Her arm comes up again and again, plunging back down into the blackness until the water hardens again mid-stab, turning the inky leg back into the shiny basalt surface we'd witnessed upon entering the chamber. The only trace that there had ever been an octopus, or that the floor had ever liquefied, is Leslie's arm, still jutting up from the middle of the smooth surface. Her body has disappeared, along with the awful monster she'd sacrificed herself to kill. We're all quiet for several moments, each taking in the terrible thing that's just happened to us in our own way, still lying on the chamber floor where the octopus monster flung us, until Ty's wet coughing breaks our silence. I stir, walking over to the cross-dressing man crumpled in a heap next to the wall. I'm sorry, Ty. I don't...
Fuck off!
he says, slowly climbing to his feet. He marches across the onyx floor, pausing briefly as another round of coughing racks his body until he spits out a glob of coagulated blood. He kneels down next to Leslie's arm. He lets his hand rest on her fingers, still in their death grip. I walk up behind him, leaving him enough space to grieve.
She said if she had to die, she wanted to die with me.
With some effort, he pries her fingers off the stinger gauntlet, pulling the weapon free. He lets the dead fingers close back around his hand, and he cries. After a while, he stands, turns to me, and slaps the stinger against my chest plate.
You're gonna need that.
He looks me in the eyes. His own are bloodshot. His face is puffy, and I can see the veins throbbing in his neck down across his injured arm and shoulder. His wound looks infected through the armor.
You're gonna need it when I get you to that fucking banquet hall. And even if it's the last thing you do before you die, I want you to shove it right up Cthulhu's ass.
Everyone remains quiet as we creep our way through the Cyclopean caverns. The only sound coming from our group is the clump, clump, clump of Karen's twisted right foot as she bounce limps along, doing her best to keep up with the rest of us, and the ragged breathing of our cross-dressing companion, Ty. He looks worse for the wear. He's pale and pouring sweat. We're all sweating under the hollowed-out heads-come-helmets of the sniffers, but Ty is sweating so badly it runs from his monster helmet like drool out of the dead beast's mouth. He clutches his swollen arm. Even through the armor, I can see it has continued to swell. The swelling has made its way into his neck as well. Now it pulses in time with his breathing. Before long, he starts to sway back and forth, clearly in bad shape. I take a drink from a small bottle I have hidden under my carpus armor. Karen eyes it, motioning for me to give her a sip. "You don't want this," I say, stowing it back under my arm. She pulls me close, looking over her shoulder at Ty.
"He's not gonna make it. We're gonna have to cut him loose."
She's right, of course. Whatever poison resides in the sniffer stingers is killing him, but I still feel obligated to mount some kind of protest in his defense. It is, after all, my crazy plan that got him into this mess to begin with. Before I can form even the most half-hearted argument in Ty's favor, we hear a noise from around a turn in the corridor just in front of us. Or is it behind us? Goddamn relay.
"Get back!"
Chef hisses. We all freeze, letting the fat cook handle the danger. He pulls out his weird stone with the hand not covered in alien sea monster armor. He creeps forward as the noise around the corner grows louder. It sounds like a pair of children giggling underwater. Karen and I take a defensive posture while Ty quietly vomits behind us. Chef turns to us as if to whisper some sort of command when suddenly he vanishes. 1 second, he's staring me in the face. The next, he's gone. Karen looks at me, puzzled. I run forward as the giggling, gurgling sound gets even louder. Whatever the creatures are, they're almost on top of us. That's when I see him, below me. Somehow the corner of the wall and the floor don't meet the way walls and floors are supposed to, and Chef has fallen into a chasm. He picks himself up off the sticky floor, seemingly unhurt, just as the horrors round the bend into full view. Why do they all have to be so ugly? These goddamn things look like giant cockroaches, but standing upright as tall as a man. They're slightly hunched over and their backs are covered by a slick black carpus. Their awful roach legs wave out in front of them, each ending with a patch of thick black hairs. Down near the bottom of their disgusting bodies is what looks like a huge barbed penis, at least 2 foot in length, maybe 3. I don't get a chance to look at them for long because the worst part of these roach creatures is their heads. Their heads are all jittering, twitching mandibles, waving antennae, and huge shiny eyes the color of rotted blood. Those are the roach heads. They've also got these baby heads, like human baby heads, jutting up from either side of their roach heads. These heads constantly ooze some kind of clear fluid or mucus out of their baby mouths. They're what's making the awful crying, cooing, and gurgling noises. There are at least 10 roachmen racing around the bend, but it's taking them forever to actually get to us. Fucking dimensions in this place. The angles are all fucked up. I lay down on my belly and reach my exposed hand down towards Chef. He reaches up, but there's too much distance between us.
"Go! Get the fuck out of here!"
Chef screams.
"You do not want to get caught by those things!"
What are they? I ask, disgusted, still trying to will my arm to be just a little longer, as though I'd be able to haul up 350 pounds of cook, even if I could reach him. Still, I have to try.
"Berserkers,"
Chef says, looking terrified.
"They're like sentries. They roam these halls, eating, fucking, and killing anything they come across. Not always in that order."
Chef backs away, pulling out his yellow stone.
"Now, kid, go! I'm not telling you again."
I stand back up. "We'll hold them off. You find a way out of there," I say, preparing to engage the roach things as they finally get close enough to smell. I take a deep breath through my nose and wish I hadn't. They smell like cat piss covered in fish guts after it's been left in the sun to rot all day. It should have made me gag, but by now, I'm used to all these twisted monsters and their shitty smells.
"Like hell!"
Chef yells back.
"You and the crippled girl's gonna hold off 10 of those things? You best grab her and run, boy, for those monsters fuck you to death."
"I'm not leaving you," I start, but Chef blurts out a short chant and points the star thing at me, knocking me back a dozen feet. I land on my ass, right in front of Karen and Ty, just as the roach creatures reach the corner Chef is stuck in. My armor is smoking and smells like burnt hair and dog shit, but it's still intact. I'm gasping, trying to catch my breath. My chest feels like I've been shot. Several of the roach monsters are already clambering into the chasm, trying to get to our big black buddy.
"Get up!" Karen yells. "We can't leave him down there! They'll kill him!"
Chef starts hollering and jumping up and down, attracting the attention of all but one of them. He fires off a chant, blasting the head clean off the first roach monster, plastering its companions in thick white goop. Its corpse falls into the weird chasm. Chef blasts 2 more, each landing on top of the last. "Come on!" Karen yells. "Wait, look! He's building a goddamn ramp out of their bodies! He's gonna get out!" My celebration is cut short as the roach thing, not distracted by Chef's yelling, reaches us, flailing its hairy legs and jutting its giant penis. I jump forward and prepare to attack. A hairy leg slashes at my face. If it weren't for my sniffer helmet, my head would have been sliced clean off. The hairs covering its multi-segmented legs are razor sharp. My helmet falls away in several pieces. I stumble backward as the big roach charges forward, intent on finishing the job, its baby head sobbing all the while. Just as it rears back to attack again, a huge sniffer stinger strikes from the right, outside my peripheral vision, impaling the left baby head and the roach head, while barely missing the baby head on the right, covering me in noxious white roach guts that smell like rotten milk. The blow is enough to cripple the disgusting monster, though, and now it hangs limp off Karen's makeshift weapon, its remaining head bawling like a newborn being drowned in a wash basin. The weight of the giant bug is too much for her skinny, atrophied legs. She drops to one knee, threatening to topple over altogether. "A little help here!" she pants, using all her strength to keep from being crushed by the monster. I try to yank it free from Karen's weapon, but it won't budge. I crawl underneath it and lay on my back, hoping I can push it free with my leg strength. "Push!" I grunt, but it's no use. The limp creature just hangs there, crushing down on top of us. It must weigh 300 pounds. "Ricky!" Karen says. She's got a weird look in her eye. I have something I have to tell you." "Oh, brother, like I need more of this shit right now." "I know," I say breathlessly, still shoving against the dead weight above me. "You're in love with me. Yeah, I've heard it before. Listen, I hate to break it to you, babe, but..." "What?" she asks, confused, even sounding a little offended. I start to speak when the remaining baby head attached to the paralyzed roach body vomits a torrent of vile, fetid seawater onto my face for my troubles. I choke and gag simultaneously as I try to blow the rancid water out of my nose. And still, I can't budge the hulking roach's body. That's when I hear Ty cry out from behind us. "Ty!" I cough out. Get this thing off us!" I look back to see if he hears me. He's just standing there a few feet away. His eyes are glazed over and he's shivering. He looks like he's got a fever. The swelling in his arm and throat are somehow even worse. His face looks fat now, obese. "Ty!" I yell again. This time I get his attention. His eyes focus. He looks at me and opens his mouth to speak. Instead of words, dozens of mice-sized sniffers pour from between his lips. He tries to scream, but more and more of the little bugs are fighting their way out of his mouth. When his throat constricts, they start to sting him from the inside. He drops to his knees. His throat swells to the size of a watermelon right before my eyes. He starts to stab at it with the full-size stinger attached to his arm to try to let the tiny monsters out so he can breathe. Blood and sniffers rush from the wound. He stuffs his free hand into the gash and pulls out handfuls of the writhing little beasts. He takes 2 ragged, wet breaths from the gaping wound before his breath hitches and he freezes, eyes wide. A moment later, he shrieks and his eyeballs roll up into the back of his head. He rips at them with his fingers as some unseen force bursts them from their moorings. Blood and brains pour from his ears. After his eyeballs are gone, his hands grope up to a small crack in his forehead. Little writhing tentacles dart in and out of the crack, fighting their way free. Using the stinger attached to his hand, he tries to bore into the crack to let the baby monsters out of his skull. He screams all the while. Finally, after too many moments, his entire head explodes, sending baby sniffers, brains, and gore 5 feet into the air. Only then does the screaming stop. As Ty's headless body thumps lifelessly to the floor, I do my best to cover Karen from the rain of bug monsters and gore that splatters over us, while still trying to hold up the paralyzed body of the roach thing threatening to crush us. In no time, I feel the sniffer's little squirming body start to crawl through the cracks in my armor. "Get this fucking thing off me!" I scream, redoubling my efforts to push away the roach monster. I'm starting to freak out pretty hard. The baby sniffers are already crawling up Karen's legs too. They're all over us. They'll start to sting us at any moment, and we'll end up like Ty too. Karen knows this as well as I do, and that's all the incentive she needs. I feel the sniffers rooting around on my clothes, under my armor, trying to find exposed skin. Panicking, I start to hyperventilate as I look down and see a little sniffer poke out from my chest plate and make its way up toward my bare neck. Come on, I whine. Karen glances over and sees the baby sniffer prodding around my neck, slowly crawling up to my face. She curses under her breath. Using her free hand to pull the slack out of the sniffer tendons that hold the armor to her body, she uses her teeth to tear knots out of the binding. Using her free hand to pull the slack out of the sniffer tendons that hold the armor to her body, she uses her teeth to tear the knots out of the binding. Within seconds, she's free of her stinger weapon still lodged in the roach heads. Able to use both hands and put her whole body weight behind her, she's able to topple the monster over, freeing us both just as the baby sniffer pries open my pursed lips with its 4 tentacles and tries to make its way inside. I bite its head off and climb to my feet, tossing the decapitated little body away before it can sting me. Karen and I both dance out of our armor as fast as we can, knocking little bug monsters off each other's backs as fast as we can, then stomping them flat before they can crawl up our shoes again. Satisfied that we're bug-free, I point at the corner, still infested with giant cockroaches. We gotta get Shep out of that pit! We take off running, leaving the paralyzed roach monster to wail as the baby sniffers sting its face over and over until it's so swollen it can no longer make its hideous noise. I almost trip over the edge and pitch myself down into the chasm when we run up to it. My brain still can't comprehend the angles in this fucking place. Karen catches me and we both gasp as we look down into the pit and see what lies down there. I finally do throw up and Karen starts to cry. Dead roach monsters litter the chasm. Their bodies lay exploded in all manner of dismemberment. Some still twitch, some still bleed. Cooked white goo turned a nasty yellow steams up from the floor, covering it as well as most of the surface of the walls. There are enough corpses piled up in the corner for Chef to climb out. Unfortunately, Chef won't be doing any more climbing. The berserkers, as he called them, are literally fucking the shit out of him, and then eating it. Chef's stomach is all torn open. He's laying on his back. His guts are all messed up and looped out across his wounded belly and chest. There are 2 berserkers left alive. The roach's huge cocks are thrusting in and out of Chef's steaming entrails, their baby heads gurgle crying the whole time. Worse, when one of Chef's intestines bursts open, the roaches use their forelimbs to scoop up the bloody shit into their jittering, chomping little mouth parts. I think he's dead at first, till he lifts his head up and looks at me with his one good eye, the other having presumably been fucked out of his skull. "Come on," Karen sobs. "Let's just go. Let's get the fuck out of this awful place." She grabs me by the arm and tries to pull me away. "No!" I yank free and start to stumble down the roach corpses. "Ricky, there's nothing you can do for him. We've got to go before something else tries to kill us." "This is all my fault," I say, the callous prick who so easily dropped an axe into his best friend's head nowhere to be found. All I can think about is Chef's robust laughter as he stood at the grill station at McHumans making fun of us white people. Seeing him down in that death pit, his body so heinously violated, something inside me snaps. I'm shaking all over, probably in shock, as I try to make my way down the bodies of the dead berserkers. Chef raises his hand to stop me. He closes his eyes and shakes his head at me.
"Fuck out of here, boy. Take that white girl. Get as far away from Raleigh as you can. This ain't no place for good people."
With that, Chef raises his star thing up to his own face and barks out one final chant, blasting his own head into pink mush. I stumble out of the pit, numb. The remaining berserkers are already pulling their dicks free of Chef's corpse. They'll be on us in moments. Without armor or weapons, Karen and I are defenseless. I can't bring myself to care. The weight of the events inside this monstrous tomb crushing down on top of me, obliterating my ability to think rationally. When I get back up off the floor, Karen stands stiff, looking past me with wide eyes. I turn to see what she's looking at. Fishbowl is just a few yards away, the hands of its wetsuit clenched into fists. I step in front of Karen instinctively. What are you doing here?" I ask, confused. I take one last swig from my bottle, draining its contents before discarding it onto the stone floor. "You're supposed to be at the banquet with the food." With Fishbowl stalking toward me and berserkers about to attack from the rear, I'm surprisingly calm, resigned to my fate. I'm ready to die, so it comes as a shock when I hear Karen say, in a small voice from behind me, "I'm so sorry, Ricky." And that's the last thing I remember. I guess Karen hit me in the head with something and knocked me out, because the next thing I knew, I was hanging here, upside down, staring at your rotten, ugly fucking face, Mr. Cthulhu. by the look of the seething throng of slaves far below the grand platform that loomed above Great Cthulhu's banquet hall. Every last living human in the flooded world had been gathered in deep relay to witness the coming of the Old Ones. They'd been herded into a semicircular area that resembled the floor of the great Roman Colosseum, except instead of dirt or sand on the ground, they stood on the same damp, slimy gray stones that made up the rest of Weird Relay. Madness seethed through the crowd in waves as the alien angles proved too much for their small human minds to comprehend. Depending where they stood or where they cast their eyes, the huge spiraling pillar upon which Great Cthulhu sat seemed to rise hundreds of feet in the air, and other times to plunge far below them. But no matter which direction they looked, the masses of starved, broken, defeated humans saw hideous, unfathomable beasts in all manner of shapes, sizes, colors, and genders. The monsters towered over the feeble vestige of humanity, perched atop a huge stone grandstand surrounding Great Cthulhu's spiral pillar, giving them a marvelous view of the day's events. Slimy grinners, fang-toothed barkers, many-faced howlers, jittery spinners, and hordes of wet things that defied any sane description jeered at the human slaves standing below them and praised the old gods far above. Even now, miles overhead, or down below depending on the angle, ancient Yog-Sothoth shifted patiently between dimensions, slowly opening the doorways into an unimaginable number of between places, the places where the Old Ones dwelt, silently waiting for this moment. Its gargantuan, jellyfish-like body appeared and disappeared into the beautiful, unearthly color that drove sane men to tear out their eyeballs and jam sharp objects between their ears. It was a beautiful sight, but not the main attraction. Soon enough, the jeering monsters and the hysterical humans all quieted down as the host of the evening's events took center stage in front of Great Cthulhu's humongous stone throne. All eyes were on the figure as he raised his hands, commanding the attention of all in attendance. The figure was, of course, Narelhotep, the personification of the Old Ones and mouthpiece of the Elder Gods. He stood, in this incarnation, a tall, slender black man. Not dark-skinned, black-skinned. He looked like a shadow, a dense, colorless smear against the light. The only part of his body not resigned to the inky blackness were his eyes, which glowed a preternatural white against the darkness, and the red of his lips and mouth like a fresh wound, a gash sliced into his obsidian, featureless face. His voice boomed out, carried by the weird angles inside the huge domed subterranean lair of Cthulhu, the nightmare amphitheater beneath sunken relay that served as his banquet hall.
"We've won!" he exclaimed. "The world is ours! Humanity's final vestige tremble before us, broken and mad!"
He gestured to the slave pit, where the humans stood shamed, covered in filth, dressed in the tattered remnants of their short reign on planet Earth. The throng of monsters cheered, whooping and jeering toward the slave pit.
"And yet,"
Narelhotep said, motioning for silence from the crowd,
"even as we stand on this glorious precipice, mere moments before the return of all the Old Ones, after their precious planet has been annihilated, flooded, wiped clean of the human scourge, one stands among them who would defy the might of this world's true leaders."
Ricky spun slowly, hung upside down with his arms tied behind his back, just above Cthulhu's throne. He hung from a rope fashioned to the clawed tip of one of the hulking beast's dragon-like wings. He was nearly bored to tears by the shadow creature's pompous speech, almost wishing the damn thing would shut up and kill him already. After all, with Karen selling him out to the Deep Ones, he was all but fucked anyway. That wasn't really what he wanted, though. He had one more trick up his sleeve to kill the monsters and unplug the drain that would unflood the world. But it was a long shot. A very long shot. Cthulhu looked bored as well. His bulbous, green, whale-like chest rose up and down slowly. His many-tentacled head rested on one hand, propped up by his elbow, which rested on the arm of his throne. His beady little black fish eyes were open but unfocused. His enormous wings hung limp, slowly swaying in time with the gargantuan monster's deep breathing. For all Ricky knew, the big fucker was sleeping through his trial. Fishbowl stood a few feet away, holding Karen by the arms. Karen, for her part, looked embarrassed and remorseful. Not that any of that mattered now. The deed was done. She chose monsters over people, a typical woman, aligned only with what best served to save her own ass. Even Boss Crab was there, standing next to Fishbowl and Karen, looking surprised by the turn of events. Behind them stood the pair of hulking leviathans that had transported all the poisoned food, which now lay in a heaping pile beside them. Encircling the entire platform were more than a dozen empty thrones, just as big as the one on which Cthulhu now sat. For the other important monsters, Ricky guessed. The ones they were going to summon right after they killed him.
He thought he could poison our food,
Narelle-hotep continued, smirking up at Ricky with his crimson slit of a mouth.
Thought he could prevent the inevitable. But the stars are right, my friends, and our time is now. This little deceiver, the shadow figure said, prancing up to Karen. This one betrayed her entire race. She didn't just betray them, she was downright happy about it. This little trooper ran right to her boss crab the moment she got wind of her friend's pathetic scheme to prevent the return of the old ones.
The contingent of monsters laughed and scoffed, while the enslaved humans murmured amongst themselves. Narelle-hotep silenced them.
Should this one live? Should her betrayal be rewarded?
Half the crowd of monsters booed, the other half cheered. The humans stood in silence, malevolent faces worn by all.
Come now,
the Shadow Man said, feigning concern.
For her loyalty to the Deep Ones, shouldn't she be allowed to witness the coming of the ages, the return of the gods from the dark? She did, after all, warn us about her friend's plot to contaminate all of this.
Narelle-hotep frowned and paused dramatically.
Wonderful food.
This time nearly all of the monsters cheered, while the slaves vocalized their disgust in the form of curses and vile insults hurled at the red-headed young woman. She looked up at Ricky with tears flowing freely down her face.
Oh, so sorry. She lives,
Narelle-hotep screamed with delight.
For now,
he added with a smirk.
But what about him?
The shadow figure said, dramatically stabbing a finger upward at Ricky.
What do we do with the rebel slave who thought he could poison great Cthulhu himself?
The crowd of undersea aliens booed and hissed, dramatically condemning the captured man.
Death?
Narelle-hotep asked, as if he didn't already know the outcome of this silly show. Ricky was being made an example of, a warning for the few remaining humans never to try a stunt like this again. And that's exactly what Ricky had hoped would happen. A roaring chant of death, death, death echoed through the vast banquet chamber. Even jellyfish-like Yog-Sothoth seemed to pulse in time with the deafening taunt. The only horrible figure not screaming death at the top of its lungs, or gills, or whatever means they used to make sound, was great Cthulhu, who still sat bored at his throne, carelessly twitching his face tentacles, waiting for the shenanigans to be over.
Death it is,
the Shadow Man yelled, prancing back and forth directly under Ricky. For a split second, the captive considered spitting on the monster below him, then thought better of it. For his plan to work, Ricky needed to remain as limp and non-threatening as possible.
How do we kill him?
Narelle-hotep asked, in the same nonchalant tone he might use to inquire about the time of day.
Come on,
Ricky said under his breath.
Should we skin him alive and serve him his own cooked flesh?
The monsters roared in approval. The shadowy figure was nearly skipping with glee as he ticked off horrible ways for Ricky to die.
Burn him alive and then drown him? Should we drown him and then burn him?
Ricky broke out in a cold sweat. This was not what he planned for.
I've got it! Let's cut out his intestines and hang him with them. Or, the Shadow Man said, dramatically holding one finger in the air, cut off his fingers and toes, and then his hands and feet, and then his arms and legs, and then cut out his eyeballs, and then slice off his tongue, and then cut out his ears.
Narelle-hotep continued, hardly pausing for breath, getting more and more worked up with each sadistic idea. If Ricky didn't put a stop to this now, he'd never get his chance. Hey, douchebag, he yelled, when the figure below had finally stopped talking, long enough to receive a standing ovation from the demoniac creatures in attendance. Narelle-hotep glanced up at Ricky, bemused smile on his face.
It seems as though the brave little human finally has something to say.
He waved the crowd to silence as they began to protest.
No. Let's hear him out. It'll be the last thing he ever says.
Ricky hesitated, spinning slowly.
Well?
Narelle-hotep said, becoming annoyed. Eat me, you sanctimonious, shit-stained looking cunt! For a moment, Nerelhotep stared at his prisoner. His form began to change shape, seeming to grow in mass. The corners of his arms and legs bulged out, and his head took on feral properties. A low growl formed in his throat, and suddenly he resembled the shadow of a gigantic bear more than that of a man. Then, just as suddenly, his form snapped back to that of a tall, thin man. Eat you! Yes! Yes! The shadow man jumped up into the air with excitement as though the revelation was the best idea of the entire evening. Perfect! Eat him! What do you say, gang? Should the great Cthulhu eat this defiant little pest alive to show his fellow monkey men that you do not fuck with the elder gods? Let him stew in the boiling stomach acids of he who shall herald their return, clinging to his final moments of life while we bring forth the supreme rulers of this dimension? The ensuing cacophony of supportive cries from the nightmare contingent was deafening. More than one of the human slaves flung themselves against the cold, slimy stones until they bashed their own brains out in order to escape the monstrous jubilation. A tribute, then, to the coming of the grand masters of this reality, Nerelhotep exclaimed. And finally, great Cthulhu stirred from his throne, reached out, and plucked Ricky off the dangling rope with no more effort or care than yanking a grape from the vine. The enormous octopoid's face tentacles quivered in anticipation for the bite-sized meal they were about to receive. The longest of the dozen tendrils licked across Ricky's face, leaving a wet, drippy smear in its wake. Ricky took a deep breath and closed his eyes. "This had better fucking work," he said to himself, silently willing his final desperate plan into motion. Doubt crept into the young man's mind when he opened his eyes again, as Cthulhu opened his seemingly fathomless maw, revealing innumerable smaller tendrils laced with razor-sharp teeth running down and down, further and further into the behemoth creature's gullet. "I don't want to fucking die," Ricky screamed inside his own head. "Holy fucking shit, I'm fucking donesos! Wait!" Relief rushed through the captive human as this momentary reprieve gained him another precious few seconds of life. He looked down to see who'd interrupted his impending execution. Boss Crab stood directly beneath him, looking more astonished than usual.
"You have to tell me,"
the unblinking crustacean said.
"After everything, was it worth it?"
Ricky glanced around the huge banquet hall, took in all of the horrific monsters gathered around to witness his demise, looked out into the sea of human faces, each and every one of them in awe that one man could stand so defiantly against the madness and futility before them. He looked back at the great Cthulhu about to swallow him whole, and back down at the small group standing on the platform with him. He let his gaze linger for an extra moment on Karen and Fishbowl standing behind Boss Crab, and then he smiled, setting his sights back on his former boss. "I'll tell you in a minute."
"What?"
Boss Crab asked, puzzled. But then it was too late to ask any more questions. Great Cthulhu finally spoke, his voice a terrible echoing boom that scattered Ricky's brain and made it hard for him to focus his thoughts, almost as though 1,000 tiny wasps stung his consciousness all at once.
"Enough!"
The giant beast roared, and with that, he tossed Ricky into the air, letting his face tentacles grab the tiny human, no more than the size of a toy truck to the awesome monster, and stuffed the captive man into his expansive throat. Karen cried out and dropped to her knees. Nerelhotep let out a whoop of joy. Boss Crab looked stunned by the whole thing, and Fishbowl stood ever silent, staring straight ahead. The throng of writhing, chomping, snapping things erupted into the loudest cheer yet as great Cthulhu stood from his throne and raised his arms into the sky, spreading his dragon-like wings as he did so, their vast width enough to stretch the entire length of the platform, dwarfing all other creatures standing below him.
"Pingui, Migna, Cthulhu, Raleigh, Gnagle, Fatagan!"
The impossible horror screamed.
"Pingui, Migna, Cthulhu, Raleigh, Gnagle, Fatagan!"
His congregation of monsters responded. And so the chant rose to the watery heavens, increasing in pitch and fervor until even the slaves below were forced to join in at the threatening tip of many stingers, claws, and slimy wormish appendages. Even Karen, sobbing hysterically from the floor of Cthulhu's grand platform, eventually gave in, resigned to her fate, and began to chant the hideous words that would spell an end to everything. High above, Yog-Sothoth came into greater and greater focus as the chant continued, pulsing brighter and brighter in that unnameable color of horror. A spiral of smoky, liquid, solid-like substance descended from the center of its jelly-like body, splitting off into many smaller tendrils, each falling until they reached the top of each of the giant thrones encircling Cthulhu's platform. Hideous shapes began to form on those thrones, and their half-heard voices joined in with the nightmarish chant.
Pingui, Mignath, Cthulhu, Raleigh, Ganago, Fatagan. Pingui, Mignath, Cthulhu, Raleigh, Ganago, Fatagan. Pingui, Mignath, Cthulhu, Raleigh, Ganago, Fatagan.
And then a funny thing happened. The hulking behemoth towering above the congregation of horrors stopped chanting. He staggered a few steps, nearly crushing Nerelhotep beneath his immense bulk. Then he clutched his stomach and let out a fart so long and loud the entire proceedings ground to an immediate halt. Beady little fish eyes registering shock, Great Cthulhu opened his mouth to speak when another stomach cramp doubled him over. This time, putrid, liquidy pink shit shot out of his asshole, creating a huge puddle at his giant clawed feet. The tiny humanoids sharing the platform with him all staggered backward, trying to avoid the growing puddle of cosmic feces splattered against the stone floor, and now shared Boss Crab's look of astonishment. Another stomach spasm forced the gargantuan beast to his hands and knees, where he began to dry heave in his own shit. A final spasm ended with Great Cthulhu opening his impossible maw and projectile vomiting a glut of spew large enough to fill a small landfill before he collapsed headfirst into the fetid mixture of shit and puke. The entire banquet hall fell silent for a tense few moments. No creature dared to move a muscle, terrified that whatever force had managed to fell the Great Cthulhu would target them next. Then, each of the netherworldly tendrils attached to the grand thrones encircling the platform slowly pulled away, causing the half-formed denizens of unspeakable dimensions to vanish once again from the earthly realm.
No! Wait!
Nerelhotep screamed.
Pingui, Mignath, Cthulhu, Raleigh, Ganagle, Fatagan!
The Shadow Man pumped his arms up and down, encouraging the contingent of monsters to rejoin his chant and continue the ritual.
Pingui, Mignath, Cthulhu, Raleigh, Ganagle, Fatagan!
But it was no use. The monster's eyes were locked on the twitching form of felled Cthulhu and the movement from the mountain of puke next to his head. A gnarled, acid-eaten human hand thrust up from the noxious sludge. The crowd of alien beasts gasped in unison as the haggard form of Ricky pushed itself out of the muck so recently disintegrating his body. Impossibly, the man stood upright and smiled, or at least he appeared to smile. Most of the hair on his head had been eaten away, leaving nasty yellow exposed areas of his skull where there was not pink, welt-ridden flesh. One of his eyeballs had glazed over white, the eyelid and most of the flesh around his orbital bone all but gone. The tip of his nose had melted away, and both sides of his cheeks lacked all skin, save for two small strips next to his bruised and swollen lips, giving him the appearance of a sinister, grinning ghoul.
No! No!
Nerelhotep howled.
How could...
He stammered in disbelief, darting his shocked eyes back and forth between the ghoulish man and the fallen god, still spasming on the floor.
It was easy,
Ricky said, brushing the remainder of gunk off his shredded flesh with bony skeletal fingers. His voice was now an octave lower, having no doubt swallowed some of Great Cthulhu's stomach acid during his short time in the beast's stomach, irrevocably damaging his vocal cords. I didn't just poison the bodies of the people I was forced to murder and cook for you cosmic swine. I also poisoned myself. This time Ricky did smile. The action tore free the thin line of flesh still connecting his cheek and lip on the left side, causing his mouth to fall open in a hideous permanent grin. Nerelhotep just stared, mouth agape.
After Sam and I experimented on a few of Boss Crab's buddies, figuring out what combination of chemicals your kind is most susceptible to, I started drinking the poison little by little, building a tolerance to it, infusing it into my bloodstream. You ever seen the movie The Princess Bride?
What?
Nothing, never mind. Anyway, I've been poisoning myself a little every day, right up until today. I didn't think it would do anything besides kill you fucking waterlogged scum, but...
he said, feeling his face and looking at his skeletal hands.
I don't feel any pain at all. In fact, I feel strong. There must have been some kind of chemical reaction between the poison and Cthulhu's gut acid. That's unexpected.
ghoulish man smiled and laughed again, causing his mouth to open up wider than his entire ghastly head.
The poison was Sam's idea. He knew we couldn't escape. Even knew we'd be caught poisoning the food. He knew we couldn't trust those other people either, he said, motioning toward Karen. He was a smart motherfucker, smarter than me. But he knew I was stronger, knew I could survive. So he chose me to drink the poison and chose himself to die. All I had to do was make sure Squiggleface over there ate me. Hell, that was the easy part.
Nerelhotep recovered from his shock. He began to grow again. 2 new pairs of arms burst out of his midsection. His fingers elongated and became sharp talons. His head stretched out, his mouth filled with red daggers. 4 new sets of hateful, glowing eyes opened up below his primary pair. His torso grew until he towered over the ghoulish Ricky.
You will not outwit the Elder Gods! Yeah,
Ricky said.
Already have.
Suddenly, Fishbowl tossed Karen to the ground, reached up and unlatched the clasp on its diving helmet, freeing the noxious substance residing inside. Just as suddenly, a deluge of brackish nightmare erupted from the helmet. It looked as if a fire hose had exploded from inside Fishbowl's suit, only it coiled through the air, waving and turning like a snake. The amount of hideous eyeball stalks, thin, hairy legs, dripping tentacles, and oozing mouths darting in and out of the thick geyser of black liquid was nearly incomprehensible. Nerelhotep turned to see what was happening behind him too late. Fishbowl's chaotic form separated into 2 halves at its front, creating a sort of giant pincher claw, and darted forward like a striking snake, splitting the Shadow Man's beastly visage cleanly in 2 at the middle. Nerelhotep's severed halves crashed to the floor. Weird, nearly translucent fluid gushed from the open wound of his trunk, while his orphaned legs twitched, now laying beside his head. At this point, the mob of creatures lining the stands broke their silence. They murmured among themselves, and some even began to move toward the banquet hall's exits. Fishbowl stalked forward, abandoning Karen where she lay, shocked and astonished on the ground, until its suited form stood shoulder to shoulder with the deformed, acid-bleached Ricky.
How could you betray your own kind?
Nerelhotep stammered, clear fluid leaking from his fanged mouth.
'Cause she's in love,
Ricky said, ripping the buckles on the front of the wetsuit open, revealing dozens of tiny, writhing forms latched onto what appeared to be monstrous nipples lining Fishbowl's humanoid midsection. Each of the little tentacled beasts bore a human head, the face of which was an exact copy of Ricky's. More monsters broke for the exits as the tide of the battle raging on Cthulhu's throne platform had clearly begun to turn in favor of the enemy. Now it was the slave contingent's turn to hurl insults at the fleeing beasts, causing some of the alien sea monsters to turn around and jump into the slave pit to attack the defenseless humans. Ricky patted Fishbowl on top of her diver's helmet.
One day, I was bored at McHumans, so I decided to drag a stepladder over to this big scary motherfucker and jack off all over her open helmet. I figured, what the hell? What's the worst that could happen? She kills me? Good! I'd be out of this fucking wet nightmare once and for all. Turns out she liked it, though, so it became a thing. I'd jack off over her fishbowl head, and she'd tickle my balls with her gross-ass sloppy appendage till I'd bust a nut. She'd gobble them up. Next thing you know, we're in love, and I'm a daddy. Ridiculous!
Nerelhotep managed. The flayed ends of his severed halves had already begun to slowly work their way toward one another. The Shadow Man was regaining his strength, putting himself back together.
Yeah, maybe, but you know what? We beat you.
Ricky lowered his head to within inches of the wounded being's face. Then he whispered through thin, acid-eaten lips,
I know where the plug is.
Nerelhotep's eyes widened and he lunged at the man with his huge clawed hands, but Ricky and Fishbowl were quicker. Ricky sidestepped the blow, darting behind the creature in the diving suit. Fishbowl's exposed appendage whipped down, scooping up Nerelhotep's severed lower half. The chaotic, writhing appendage threw the dismembered limbs into the air, and, before gravity forced them back down, the appendage transformed from a menacing claw into a grotesque mouth. It snatched the Shadow Man's legs out of the air and gobbled them down. Screaming out in terror, Nerelhotep scrambled toward the edge of the platform, intent on throwing himself down into the slave pit, much more confident of his chances with the disheveled humans than the monstrosity before him. But the gigantic mouth, which housed many legs, feelers, eyeballs, and tentacles as fangs, swooped down and took the remainder of Nerelhotep's body into its disgusting jaws.
We will never be stopped!
Nerelhotep cried, feigning bravery, even as his voice quivered and broke. even as the stands emptied far below, removing any chance of a valiant rescue attempt by his fellow monsters, and high above him, the jellyfish-like body of Yogg-Sothoth disappeared from his place near the top of the domed banquet hall, closing the dimensional rift that would have allowed the Elder God's passage into this world. Nerelhotep had failed his masters. Trying to maintain his dignity, the Shadow Man closed his eyes and sobbed out,
That is not dead, which can eternal lie, and yeah,
Ricky interrupted.
And with a chomp and a bite, even evil fucks like you could die.
Nerelhotep's screams of terror were cut short as Fishbowl made quick work of his mauled body, pulling the whole gory mess back inside her helmet. The top slammed shut with a loud clang.
Make sure you chew your food,
Ricky said, grinning.
We don't want him coming back up later.
With that, the ghoulish man turned around just in time to see Boss Crab fleeing between the two gargantuan bodies of the Leviathans toward the spiral staircase that wrapped around the humongous platform and led down to the slave pit below. Reopening the top of Fishbowl's helmet, Ricky stuck his whole arm inside, rooting around for something inside the impossibly large dimensions of the interior of the Cosmic Horror's suit.
Stop him,
Ricky said, pulling out the very same fire axe Boss Crab had made him use to murder his best friend. Boss Crab stumbled down the staircase, frantically looking back over his shoulders every few steps to see if he was being followed. He made it around the pillar once, seemingly without notice. Confident he could make a break for it and lose himself in the chaos of the monsters and slaves below, he took off at a sprint, intent on clearing the last few steps 4 or 5 at a time when, wham! He slammed into something hard, causing him to stumble backward. Shaking his head to clear it, he looked up to see a titanic wall of scummy, fetid black water, home to thousands of disgusting, writhing things blocking his passage.
You work for me. You can't do this.
Boss Crab screamed, looking up the vast pillar to the top where Fishbowl stood, helmet open, preventing our former boss from getting any further. The creature said nothing. Boss Crab looked off to the side of the staircase, but it was impossible to judge the distance to the floor. He was afraid he'd crack his shell if he jumped. Hearing something fall and land behind him, the giant crustacean spun around, just in time to see Ricky raising up out of a crouch position, having jumped off the platform above.
Don't look so surprised to see me,
Ricky said, grinning that same huge, sinister new grin of his. Boss Crab skittered backwards until his shell bumped up against the wall of gunk created by Fishbowl. He dropped to his knees and clasped his claws together.
Please, Ricky, spare me. I was good to you. I let you live. I was just doing what I was told.
Yes, Ricky said, taking the fire axe in both hands.
Yes, what?
The crab sputtered.
Killing my best friend. Seeing my coworkers ripped to shreds by monsters from an undersea hell. Being eaten by a god. It was all worth it to see you on your little knees, begging for your life after you personally oversaw the deaths of tens of thousands of people just like me. It was so worth it. With that, Ricky raised the axe over his head and plunged it down right between Boss Crab's eye stalks, splitting right through the thick shell, sinking into the monster's gooey brains. One of his eye stalks sagged to one side, twitching in such a way that finally made the huge crab look something other than surprised. Now he looked dead. Back on top of the platform, Karen stood alone. Fishbowl had her back to the crippled redhead, seemingly ignoring her. The scared girl stumbled around, trying to avoid looking at the gigantic fallen body of Cthulhu. To do so invoked waves of intense madness that even her current prone and defenseless state did little to abate. Taking deep breaths, Karen desperately scanned the platform for any means of escape, anywhere to hide, to disappear before... A noise from the spiral staircase caught her attention. She froze. Click, clack, click, clack. The steady beat continued until she saw the hateful head of Ricky come grinning up the stairs. The noise was that of his exposed toes clicking against the stone floor, now little more than gnarled stumps of bone jetting out from his mangled shoes. "Leave us," Ricky said. Without hesitation, the fetid gunk rushed back inside Fishbowl's helmet. The top slammed shut, and the hulking creature stomped away, busying herself with untying the Leviathans from their post near the empty thrones. Ricky walked up to Karen until he hovered directly over her. He said nothing, only stared at her with that huge, whited-out eye bulging from its haggard socket. The crippled girl tried not to breathe through her nose and stifled a gag as the smell of his acid-burned skin wafted towards her. "Ricky, she began, but the crazed, half-melted man grabbed her around the throat before she could finish. She cried out in pain as his skeletal fingers poked into her flesh, threatening to tear out her jugular.
Ricky yanked the girl off her feet, dragging her, forcing her to stumble forward toward the platform's edge or have her throat ripped out in the process. Once there, he threw her to the ground, knelt on one knee, and grabbed her by the hair, pulling her toward the ledge until she teetered half on, half off the structure. "Ricky, please," she begged, vertigo racking her body from head to toe as she looked down at the slave pit far below. The people looked like specks of pepper down there. She reached up and grabbed Ricky's hand, managing to turn herself around and face her aggressor. His devil face sneered back at her. She was close enough to see black, rotting spots along his gum line.
Please? Please what, bitch? Please don't kill you? Don't throw you down to those people down there you sold out just to save your own crippled ass?
Ricky lifted her face until her nose nearly touched what was left of his.
You didn't think I'd actually pull it off, did you? You thought I was just some loser, slaving away at McHumans till my time was up and I got served as the next meal, didn't you? Bet you feel silly now, he cackled as he shoved her head back down.
In a quiet voice, she said,
"I saved your life, Ricky. I saved you from the berserker. Please don't kill me."
Ricky smacked her across the mouth.
Why? So we can both live happily ever after, cooking people at McHumans? I don't want you, Karen. I don't want that life. You chose the monsters. You chose slavery and misery over hope and freedom.
Karen stopped crying then, stopped struggling. Her eyes narrowed and she lifted her head of her own volition, meeting the crazy man eye to eye.
"I did what I had to do, motherfucker. Yeah, to save my own skin. I'm 5'2" and my fucking legs barely work. I don't let that slow me down, and I fucking survived the end of the world on my own, by myself. If you were in my shoes, you'd have laid down and died when shit got crazy up there. When the sky bled, when your neighbors started spontaneously exploding. Yeah, I picked a side, and I fucked up. I chose wrong, and I'm gonna die for it. But you know what? Fuck it. I did what I did, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because I do what I have to do to survive,
Ricky said, quietly finishing her thought. He sat back, releasing his hold on her. He offered his hand. Puzzled, she took it. He stood and pulled her to her feet.
You're a survivor, Karen. We need survivors.
He nodded towards the slave pit, where a monster the size of a house, with the shape and consistency of a meatball and half a dozen thick stalks tipped with razor-sharp mouths, terrorized a group of humans in the far corner of the area.
They need you. What we're about to do now, when we pull the plug and let the water drain back down to where it came from, it'll be worse than before. Much worse.
Fishbowl rode one of the enormous fish-headed beasts over to where the two humans stood talking, leading the other by its saddle straps. Ricky climbed the huge, unmounted behemoth and then turned back to face Karen.
How about you pick the right side this time?
He said, grinning as he dug his heels into the fish beast's gills, causing it to leap up and over the shocked girl, soaring right over the edge of the platform. The Leviathan landed directly on top of the meatball monster. Splat! Smashing it to bits, covering the terrified slaves in gobs of gelatinous goop. Up on the platform, Fishbowl offered Karen her hand. The young woman took a deep breath and nodded, climbing the Leviathan, mounting the saddle as the gargantuan thing leaped down next to Ricky's fishy steed. By now, every last monster had fled the banquet hall. Ricky stood on his saddle, raising his arms up, commanding the attention of the battered and beaten people standing before him.
What we're gonna do is impossible, but what I just did up there was too. We're gonna chase down every last one of those monsters and we're gonna kill them. We're gonna pull the plug on this flooded world and we're gonna swim back to the surface where we'll rebuild civilization so that my beautiful tentacle babies have a warm, dry place to lay their slimy little heads at night. And we need each and every one of you to do it. Are you with me?
The slaves just stared at him, dumbfounded.
I said, are you with me?
Suddenly a huge shadow fell over the impromptu rally. All eyes left Ricky and fixated, horrified, over his shoulder. Ricky turned to see the gigantic form of Cthulhu rise up out of his puddle of shit and puke. The awesome monster extended his wings and raised his massive clawed arms into the air. When he spoke, his voice shook the entire hall.
Aye! Cthulhu! Vertagen!
He screamed. The slaves began to whimper and whine.
Aye! Cthulhu!
The elder god began again, but stopped mid-sentence. When he opened his mouth to chant again, his innards turned inside and shot out of his tentacled mouth in a torrent of gore. Great Cthulhu teetered forward once and then fell backward off the platform, crashing onto the stone floor behind the grand pillar towering above the slave pit with a tremendous thud. Cthulhu was dead. The people stood staring, mouths agape, totally unable to process what had just happened. Finally, Karen stood up in her saddle seat, thrust a twisted-up little hand into the air and screamed, "Aye! Aye! Ricky! Ricky! Aye! Aye! Ricky! Ricky!" The slaves slowly joined in until the hall echoed with the chants of praise for their new leader, the man without a face, humanity's last hope. Ricky smiled wide and screamed,
"Let's go pull us a motherfucking plug!"